Welcome, everyone. As you're signing in on today's webinar, please take a moment to use the question box at the bottom of the screen to share a thought or two about what you think are the most pressing nutrition and physical activity issues facing Kentucky children today. I'll give you a minute, and at exactly 2:01, we will get started with today's webinar. So again, take a few minutes, or 1 minute, and just type in the question box below to give us your thoughts about the pressing issues on nutrition and physical activity issues facing Kentucky children today. Okay, thank you. Let's get started. Welcome to the 18th Annual Howard L. Bost Memorial Health Policy Forum, brought to you by the Foundation for a Healthy Kentucky. I am Allison Adams, Vice President for Public Policy at the Foundation, and I'm delighted to get us started today. We are doing the forum a little differently this year because of the pandemic. Instead of meeting together for a full day, we've turned the forum into a monthly webinar series. We are delighted that you have chosen to join us this afternoon, the third in a 5-webinar series. If you have not already, I encourage you to visit our website to learn about each of the other 4 webinars in the series. The Foundation for a Healthy Kentucky is a nonprofit, nonpartisan 501c3 organization with one goal: to improve the health of Kentuckians. For that end, we offer this forum free of charge. In memory of Howard L. Bost, the forum is designed to highlight programs and policies that, based on real-world evidence, improve health. It is an example of the Foundation's approach. We bring together Kentucky residents, advocates, providers, education, and policy leaders to learn about and advocate for programs and policies proven to help Kentucky adopt, implement, and expand health improvement success stories. This approach is also behind the Kentucky Coalition for Healthy Children, which is now seeking members. The Foundation is the backbone organization for this newly launched coalition, which will work to identify and promote policies to improve children's health in the school setting. You can learn more about the coalition at KentuckyHealthyChildren.org. Now on to today's event. The title of this year's Bost Policy Forum is Moving Kids Towards Natural Highs, and we're focusing on programs and policies that help move Kentucky kids away from substance use, suicide, and other risky behaviors, and toward healthy behaviors that will benefit them throughout their lives. Our partner for this year's forum is Kentucky Youth Advocates, the Commonwealth's independent voice for kids. Kentucky Youth Advocates, under the direction of Dr. Terry Brooks, has done fantastic work, and I want to thank him and his team for the work they do to improve child well-being in our state. I'm happy to introduce today's moderator, Mary Ann Smith-Edge. Mary Ann is a food and nutrition expert from Owensboro, Kentucky, and a member of the Foundation's Board of Directors. She is a registered dietitian and founder of the Agri-Nutrition Edge, a food and agricultural communications consulting firm. She is also a 6th-generation farm owner. The Foundation is honored to have her moderate today's forum. Mary Ann, I'll turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Allison, and welcome again, everyone, to today's webinar, Promoting Healthy Lifestyles Through Nutrition and Physical Activity. Our presenters are going to highlight policies and programs that research shows that can help children and youth get the nutrition and physical activity they need right now and establish behaviors while they're young that will help them achieve their optimal health throughout their lives. We think this topic is critical for the future of Kentucky, and especially during this global pandemic, when so many of our children may be missing important opportunities for healthy meals and adequate physical activity every day. Today, we have 4 speakers that will give us great insight, and I'll introduce each one of them prior to their 10-minute presentation. We will then open up the webinar for questions after all the speakers are finished. So a couple of housekeeping reminders before we get started. Please remember that all audience and speaker microphones should be on mute so to help reduce background noise. If you're posting on social media about this webinar, and we encourage that, please use the hashtag 2020 Bost Forum. And you are welcome to write in your questions at any time during the webinar, as you did when you first started. And you don't need to wait until the Q&A session at the end. Just type your question whenever you think about it. And if you want a particular speaker to answer a question, just note that person's name so I can direct the question appropriately. After all the speakers, we will try to get to every question during the live webinar, but if I don't get to yours, please know that we will capture your question and get a response to you after the webinar. And finally, these webinars are recorded and then posted on the Foundation for a Healthy Kentucky website. The link is on your screen right now, and we'll show it again at the end of today's webinar. So let's get started. First, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Amanda Goldman, fellow registered dietitian, who is celebrating her one-year role as a healthcare industry sales strategist for Gordon Food Service. Previously, she was director of Catholic Health Initiatives Food and Nutrition Services National Program, as well as director of Diabetes and Nutrition Care for CHI St. Joseph in Kentucky. Amanda is a past president of the Kentucky Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, and she serves on the Foundation's Community Advisory Council. Amanda?
Great. Thanks so much, Marianne. I'm really excited to be here today and to get this webinar kicked off for the group. And I'm humbled to be on such a fabulous panel of speakers. So without further ado, let's get started. My portion of today's webinar is discussing about healthy lifestyles through nutrition and physical activity to get the group going. Some of the topics that we'll discuss, I'm just going to give a very brief overview on who is GFS, some benefits of proper nutrition, going over a little bit of meal patterns in the school food service area, some food service pivots, supply chain challenges, future operational changes in the areas of food service, as well as some industry collaboration working with manufacturers as well as distributors. As you can see on your slide there, this is an added glance for Gordon Food Service. And for those of you that are not familiar with GFS, we are a broadline food service distributor and have been in business for about 120 years. We have 5 generations of the Gordon family, and we're actually based in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And we do have a large distribution center located very close to Louisville, Kentucky, and it's actually in Shepherdsville, Kentucky. And we provide services for both commercial and non-commercial spaces in the world of food and nutrition. So moving on to benefits of proper nutrition, really focusing on kids, and that's why we're all here today. We know that there are multiple benefits to proper nutrition for both adults and kids, too many to name today. For one, we know that a good balanced diet ensures essential vitamin and mineral support to support healthy growth. We also know that healthy eating, in addition to regular physical activity, helps children and young adults to decrease their risk of such chronic diseases as type 2 diabetes, obesity, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, as well as certain types of cancers. Additionally, a balanced plate and a varied diet really helps kids to develop an appreciation of food as well as various cultures. And it really is so important to expand their horizons with respect to the diversity of thought and experiences. So focusing now specifically on school breakfast and lunch benefits. Going back, the National School Breakfast Program started back in 1966 as a pilot program, and it became permanent in 1975. And greater than 80% of schools participate across the country, including about 12.9 million students are served per day. with obviously the goal there is to improve the overall health of our students. Some benefits that you can see on the screen there to proper nutrition include improved student learning, reducing childhood obesity, improved attendance, as well as test scores, fewer distractions from hunger during classroom learning, decreased food insecurity, and also breakfast allows families to have more time in the morning to get ready and maybe even a few extra minutes of sleep. And then improved overall diets, and then, of course, reimbursement for our schools. This next slide goes over the meal pattern that you can see there for grades K through 5, 6 through 8, as well as 9 through 12. And I'm not going to take some time to go through this, but I did just want to show these to you on the screen, and probably many of you are very familiar with all of these. That was the breakfast pattern, and now this is the lunch meal pattern. And again, we're all probably pretty familiar with this, but from a foundational standpoint, wanted to at least show these during this slide presentation. So moving along to food service pivot. We know that we're going to have a lot of operational changes have happened since COVID-19. So let's segue now into discussing some of those from a food service management perspective and really what's occurred in the months since the pandemic started back in the spring of this year. The COVID-19 crisis is a forceful catalyst of numerous changes, including operational changes, student, parent, and employee expectation changes, supply chain disruptions, food manufacturer, as well as distributor changes. We know this public health crisis has and already will continue to impact human behavior and change the way that we do business and provide meals to our students. At the end of the day, it will be our students, parents, employees, and regulatory agencies who will drive our operational changes going forward. So now let's talk a little bit about some of the supply chain disruptions that have occurred. There have been a multitude of those disruptions since March. And the supply chain is really a complex system of matching supply with demand that's currently a little bit still off kilter. That's complicated by some of the healthcare-related furloughs and restaurant layoffs and closings across the country. There have been negative impacts to both the commercial and non-commercial segments, including healthcare, schools, as well as universities. As of September 13th, there were 494 meat processing facilities with at least one confirmed case of COVID-19. There were over 42,000 workers that have contracted COVID-19 and as many as 203 deaths from the disease. Plants have needed to temporarily shut down for deep cleans and or alter their cleaning processes, and the CDC has issued guidance for safer work environments. We know there have also been higher prices and reduced supplies of beef, pork, and poultry, and a lot of that was caused by labor shortages as well as reduced harvests that are occurring now and will be in the near future. Some produce crops were destroyed or not used. We all probably remember seeing those stories on the news or reading in a magazine, online, I should say, about dairy farmers dumping excess milk that was designated for schools and restaurants that were closed. It's also important to recognize that farmers don't have or didn't have the same demand for the product, and that's going to be an impact in the future. And it's important to recognize that it takes about 3 years to go to market for a cow, about 1 year to go to market for a pig, 3 months to market for a chicken, and about 6 to 12 months to market for various types of produce. We also know that approximately 50% of milk, eggs, produce, and meat that goes to the food service industry, and all of a sudden, back in March and April, that completely stopped without warning. So obviously there were a whole lot of ripple effects that occurred secondary to that, and we're just now starting to come out of that. So thinking about a little bit the supply chain challenges and what came from some of those disruptions, we know that COVID-19 negatively impacted the food service supply chain, affecting the availability of many products. There was an immediate growth in demand for safety and sanitation-related items, chemicals, disinfectants, hand sanitizer, disposables, as well as individually wrapped items. There was an immediate halt in the overall distribution center purchasing. There was an excess inventory in warehouses that was secondary to lower demand from the commercial segment, really including in restaurants and the business and industry segments. And then near future supply and demand production impacts. We know that going forward, there's going to need to be significant data analysis to assist with future farming and production planning. It's also important to note that excess inventory caused some limited ability to source new products as we've been going through this pandemic. And some other challenges included the fact that distributors may have had difficulty meeting manufacturer minimums. Also, distribution routes may have been affected, and numbers of deliveries per week potentially may have been reduced. So now let's focus on some of the future operator changes and the next normal in school food service. We know it goes without saying there's going to be an ongoing focus on safety protocols, infection control, as well as staff training, comprehensive evaluation of menu items, flexibility in menu structure. Innovation is going to be necessary by the food service industry, and then really increased collaboration with our industry partners. So how can we collaborate together? Communication is a key ingredient between all parties, and it's imperative to work together. Things such as menus and offering culinary assistance, portability, again, those individually wrapped products, simplifying menus as needed. Having our industry partners, such as our distributors and manufacturers, to help to provide some tools, to help to provide audits and training for the operators. And then other value-added services can be things such as chemical warewashing, disaster planning, preparation for surveys, community outreach, virtual teaching kitchens, and of course, forecasting reports and supply chain reports that can help the operator move forward as they do their menu planning. I also wanted to take just a quick second to note that GFS, we have a nutrition resource center, and this is really a group of great registered dietitians and support team members that really focus on nutrition, wellness, food safety information, and they help to build menus for our customers, and that's something that's really wonderful. It's utilized a lot in our schools and healthcare services, specifically senior living, and really is a wonderful way that a distributor can work with an operator. And now let's turn to food safety. This is a top priority for every single kitchen anywhere. We provide access to the best resources and strategies, so it's really important that we know that we can help our customers and help operators to serve their products and their menu items with confidence. It's important to note that there needs to be a product recall system, and within our organization, we have that available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and are very, very quick to notify operators when there is a recall via various communication channels. And now I'm going to turn to stewardship and talk about that just for about a minute or two. Stewardship in all forms is extremely important. We know that we need to minimize the environmental impact, as our planet is the source of our food and the future for our children. We need to ensure corporate sustainability, and we need to promote social responsibility. And it's vital that we care for our extended family and employees, customers, suppliers, and the communities where we serve. An example of collaborating together and serving our communities that I would like to briefly share is regarding a school system right here in Kentucky. A former staff member of mine, actually, when I was the Director of Nutritional Services at St. Joseph Hospital in Lexington, his name is Austin Dacey, and Austin is now the Director of Food Service for Harrison County Schools, and he's been the Food Service Director there for about the last 8 years. Many of you probably remember that Harrison County was the first county in Kentucky that had a COVID positive case. I spoke with him just last week, and he had shared some of his story with me. At the U.S. school, they planned their purchases of such commodities such as beef, chicken, pork, canned vegetables, and fruits about a year in advance. When the pandemic hit, they quickly needed to pivot to be able to provide meals to go, just like in restaurants, and they received funding from the Department of Defense, and they worked with their distributor, who just happens to be GFS, and they now successfully package foods in a heat and serve model or a heat and chill model, depending on what meal it is for the day. The menu items are placed on specialized trays, and they're in, quote, ovenable trays that are sealed for safety. And for the school year, they started their meal delivery program on September 4th, and parents just need to simply fill out the meal request form for their kids to be included in their program if they're not already. And lastly, I wanted to talk a little bit about diversity, and that commitment to diversity is essential. We know that it's important that we all work together to meet the needs of the increasingly diverse communities where we serve, including our schools. To help achieve this goal, I wanted to mention that we are really proud members of the Multicultural Food Service and Hospitality Alliance, the National Restaurant Association. And I would be remiss, especially in light of our newly elected VP of the U.S., if I didn't mention that our partnership with the Women's Food Service Forum And then also GFS is now a proud member of the newly formed Kentucky Coalition for Healthy Children that is led by the foundation's own Amalia Mendoza. And that's something that we're really proud of and excited to be a part of. And with that, that is the closing of my particular portion of the slides. And so now I'm going to pass it back over to Mary Ann. So thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Amanda, for your insights. Our next speaker is Jamie Sparks. Jamie is the National School Health Program Manager for a national nonprofit called ETR, which works to advance health equity. Many of you may know Jamie, who served as the Coordinated School Health Director for the Kentucky Department of Education from 2010 to 2018. He is also the immediate past president of SHAPE America, the Society of Health and Physical Educators. Jamie, it's all yours.
Great. Thanks so much, Mary Ann, and hello, everyone. For today, we're going to transition that conversation around nutrition into looking specifically around the physical education and physical activity lens. But I will say the start of this is going to be really around health equity in general. So nutrition still applies, but obviously student health and wellness as a whole. And so as we look at that equity issue, I'm still very honored not only to work nationally, but also still serve as Kentucky SHAPE's Executive Director here in Kentucky. So as we look at that equity issue to start off this conversation, we actually had Dr. Charles Bash here a number of years ago, back in 2011, as a part of the American School Health National Conference. It was in Louisville, actually, when they released the report, Healthy Students Learn Better. And so we've known for a while there's this fundamental problem in education that sometimes student health and wellness is not as prioritized or not a norm that it can be. So you're going to hear some great examples of things that are happening, but the equity issue is why it's not happening in every school. Why do all students not have the same accessibility and the same amount of time allocated around these issues? So we look at the issue of accountability and how that makes a difference in what schools are able to do and accomplish, and how that's starting to shift in a lot of ways, especially because of COVID-19 as we move forward. We know there's a lot of rhetorical support around school health and the mission of schools, but yet we know there's been a lot of gaps. And so as we think about that, what we're starting to see, and we've seen a number of years ago through the federal, when we shifted from No Child Left Behind into the Every Student Succeeds Act, is we're trying to move the education priorities to a more whole child focus. And we've seen this happen under COVID back in March. Rather than being about test scores, it was around what are we doing to support our students and our communities, healthy, safe, engaged, supported, challenged. Those are the things that schools do on a regular basis, but sometimes do not show up on school report cards and measures. And that was something that actually a number of years ago, in the middle of No Child Left Behind, ASCD, the Association of Supervision, Curriculum, and Development, talked about aligning and how communities and schools can look at the school environment around policy, practices, and resources to help support the development of the whole child. And obviously, nutrition and physical education, physical activity are all critical components of a whole child approach to education. CDC, all the way back in 2002, talked about if we cannot coordinate and modernize our school health programs as a part of this educational reform. And so the one thing that COVID has done for us is right now there's so many conversations around reimagine education. For the first time in over 2 decades, we didn't have fall testing. So what that means is this past October, we're not reporting on that standardized measures. And so not that standardized measures can't be used, but it became the end-all be-all over the last 2 decades. And so this shift is going to help open some new things for possibilities around school health and wellness as it relates to nutrition, physical activity, and physical education. The whole child, another key component of this as we move forward, CDC worked and coordinated with ASCD to create a new updated coordinated school health model. That coordinated school health model had been out for a number of years, but it wasn't a part of the mainstream of what schools do and how they do business. In the state of Kentucky, every school district is required to have a wellness policy through the Nutrition Act, but yet sometimes those are just static policies. They've lacked some feedback and some things, so we've tried to update those over the last few years. And so looking at this from the WISC model, and what I'm going to show you here on the screen, the whole school, whole community, whole child approach. That puts the whole child tenets in the middle of that model, as well as wrapping those 10 components of coordinated school health, but also stresses the importance of the community. This is a philosophical model that all schools and districts can go by to improve coordination, communication around policies and programs at the local level. That's one of the things we always struggle with in education policy is this concept of local control. A WISC approach, a whole school, whole community, whole child approach, allows schools the flexibility to do those things that work best for their school community, but yet have consistency in the infrastructure in which guides those decisions to make sure that student health and wellness are always a prioritized part of the outcomes that are happening. The other key part of Dr. Bass's research, and this is where we've really had the equity issue when it comes to student health and wellness, is around the achievement gap. So many times the end-all be-all was always the achievement gap. And so there's a number of things that we've continued to invest money and time into, but oftentimes that comes at the expense of physical education time and physical activity time within the school day. And so as long as our priorities were focused on standards and school financing and teacher prep, and that even opened up the door for this conversation around charter schools. But one of the often overlooked interventions and strategies to close the achievement gap, which is ultimately the goal no matter how we measure, is around those reducing educationally relevant health disparities. And that's exactly what Dr. Bass's research centered on a number of years ago. But we now, because of COVID and because of a new administration coming in, we have a lot more opportunities to really seize this moment to reimagine education. He listed those 7 priority areas of relevant health factors. And so as you look at that, 2 of those 7 that he identified are 2 of the topics that we're talking about today, physical activity and breakfast. But obviously, these 2 also are not independent of the others. There are some linkages between those others as far as overall health and wellness when it comes to nutrition and physical activity. He also talked about there was reciprocal relationships, health, education, and poverty. And education is always the change agent that's able to impact the other 2 with the right investments. He also talked about the causal pathways. And so as we think about that and these bigger school goals we've always had, if you're going to invest in PE and PA in your school building, having those connections to those bigger education outcomes of the way we measure is an important strategy. So as you see this, we'll go through these slides very quickly, but there's the one that connecting physical activity and breakfast around cognition for students. So obviously improvement in cognition helps to achieve education outcomes. Here we see the one around school connectedness in physical activity and how that connects. And Dr. Bass's research is amazing in making these pathways and just demonstrating that to school leaders. Absenteeism, there we see breakfast come up and physical activity again. So a lot of these things are areas that are often neglected by schools rather than things we get credit for or we're able to fund. So the whole school, whole community, whole child approach certainly gives us a way to look at that through a new lens. So as it comes to state policy, what happens in Kentucky? Shape America has a Shape of the Nation report, and here's the highlights of that report. You'll notice the 3 glaring areas here with the red X's. There is no requirement in the state of Kentucky for 30 minutes of PE. There's no requirement at the middle school or the high school level for minutes. In fact, for a student in the state of Kentucky, kindergarten through 12th grade, the only thing that's required is a half credit of graduation. So everything else is completely local control for schools and districts when it comes to PE time. We do have the wellness policies I mentioned earlier, so that is a part that the school has to have, but ultimately it's up to that local district what requirements are in that. The legal requirements schools are required to report every year on an annual basis. And then the Legislative Research Commission a number of years ago did do a report on this that is still available. I'd be glad to send you that link if you're not able to grab it from the slide. So as we look at this, there are a couple questions we get on our website all the time. So we do have those on the Kentucky Shape website. That's around the recess guidance and around marching band ROTC. This is one on a PE policy perspective. We used to get that a lot when I was at the Department of Education. Can we count this? Can we not count that? So we do have those that have been provided as guidance that are included on our website to answer those specific questions. And if those come up, be happy to go more into detail onto those. Lastly, we'll get through the ESSA. The Every Student Succeeds Act is the new federal education bill. We had some great conversations here in Kentucky around access and opportunity, and those were not fulfilled by some of the things that happen at both the federal level through the DeVos administration and some of the local requirements that we had requested when Dr. Pruitt was here as the commissioner. But we do have some ideals that were put into that plan to allow a more equitable approach to allow health and PE to count within the school day. But big picture, how do we get there in Kentucky as we move forward, and what's the answer for us? One of the things I think is key to this is it's a concept of a WISC component, but having a comprehensive school physical activity program, having a CSPAP. That allows local control. A lot of people want to say daily PE, daily PE. Well, it's not very practical to have daily PE, honestly, and people find that surprising to hear that coming from a PE teacher. But schools are so big today that if we mandated daily PE, we'd have a lot of unintended consequences. We don't have enough teachers. We don't have enough building space. Having 80 kids in a PE class just to get minutes in is not necessarily quality. So quantity and quality are always the issue. So asking schools to look at their environment comprehensively. What are the ways that we can integrate PE within the day, that we can integrate movement within the day? What are the ways that we can partner with families? What are the ways we can partner within the community? And that really gives us a lens in which to look and move forward to having some infrastructure at the state level, but also allowing for that flexibility at the local level and to avoid any unfunded mandates, but also building to position schools for the right conversations. So there's other ways to continue to do that, and we'll be glad to take those questions towards the end. But there's some other ways around how to effectively coordinate policies, programs, and practices, and having someone in charge of those outcomes at the local school district level. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Mary Ann.
Thank you, Jamie, very much for your excellent comments. Our next speaker is Paula Little. Paula is an assistant superintendent and supervisor of instruction at Clinton County School District, which is located on the south central border of Kentucky. Paula and I also serve together on the Foundation for a Healthy Kentucky's Board of Directors. In 2013, Clinton County Schools won a 6-year grant from the foundation that addressed both nutrition and physical activity. Today, Paula will tell us about what the district learned during the grant and outcomes going forward. Paula?
Thank you, Mary Ann. Good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be here to talk to you today. We are honored to be asked to talk about some of the things that have gone on in Clinton County and our Healthy Hometown project. Healthy Hometown Group is a broad-based coalition of about 30 community partners that came together to focus on health. One of the things I needed to tell you before we started is who we have been. Based on 2012 statistics, 74% of Clinton County residents were overweight. Only 17.1% of school-aged children in Clinton County were eating the daily recommended servings of fruits and vegetables. Only 21% of our school-aged children were active on a daily basis. Our county's rates of diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, and other chronic diseases related to obesity were significantly higher than state and national averages. Clearly, we were a county that needed to do some work. We have approximately 10,000 people. We have been considered a persistent poverty county by ARC for many years. Our health is only one aspect, but to go back to what Jamie said, we felt if we could start to improve health, that we would improve other ways as well. Some of the strategies that we had in our local coalition. We were fortunate to receive funding not only from the Foundation for a Healthy Kentucky, but from several other sources who believed in our mission and who thought we could make a difference. One of the main things we thought, changing a culture is not a short-term goal, but a long-term proposition. You cannot change how people think, how they eat, and how they behave physically and get that done in the short term. We wanted to go slowly and steadily, but we wanted to make progress. Another thing, communities must have a strong, consistent, good health message everywhere and strive to make the healthy choice the easy choice. We wanted our children, everywhere they looked in the community, to be able to say, oh, that's a good health choice. That's easy. Let's do that. I had rather have some fruits and vegetables than go to McDonald's and eat another quick meal. And that needed to come not only from the school, but the community, the media, the church, everybody we could get, we try to get involved. We also started with the premise that it's easier to change youth behavior than adult behavior. If you change the kids, sometimes the adults will follow. We all know how hard it is to change adult behavior anyway. We wanted to understand that combating childhood obesity is complex, and so we wanted to work on changing habits that included good nutrition and regular physical activity. The important thing was promoting good health, not just losing weight. In fact, that was never mentioned. We're changing our habits. Last thing I wanted to tell you here is that schools are a critical partner in any effort to improve child health. Your school district will be your most important partner. I remember the old bank robber, Willie Sutton. He got famous when they said, "Why do you rob banks?" And he said, "That's where the money is." Why do you involve schools? That's where the kids are. So some of the things we did for better nutrition. We had a mobile summer feeding bus stop cafe. We redecorated an old bus, went around to key places in the community, and gave healthy meals during the summer to many, many students. Some didn't have enough food, some had food, and they were eating Cheetos and Mountain Dew. This was better. We had an after-school supper program. Again, make sure kids are eating healthy. We served over 20,000 suppers in one school year. We had free fruits and veggies at our elementary school, again, through a state grant, but it was wonderful to see kids choosing oranges, choosing bananas, instead of going to pick up a candy bar. We had a Try This School Cafeteria program. Kids got to try new foods every month. We would have fingerling potatoes or celery, or we had blood oranges for Halloween. They loved it. It gave them new things to try. Grab-and-go breakfast. Just like our experience with the mobile food bus, these things all came really in handy once COVID came around. We did some raised garden beds in schools. The kids learned how to grow their own vegetables. Surprisingly, kids that never liked broccoli before, when they ate broccoli they had grown, they thought it was delicious. And we had other nutrition activities going on, like plated up recipes to show the families how you can cook this at home. We had a backpack program. We had more parent education. We had nutritional mini lessons. Physical activity, we started walking clubs. Kids that got to school early now could get up and walk. We did Take 10 in the classroom. Every day kids would take 10 minutes out, get up, and take an activity break in the classroom. Teachers can always give you 10 minutes. We had other PE improvements. So we added additional PE time not only at the elementary school, but at the middle school. We put PE breaks in the day. We trained our PE teachers in how to have more engaging classes. We used the Spark curriculum, which was a big hit not only with the kids but the teachers. And we put physical activity breaks into the day for all of our students. We had Fitness Buddies program. This helped to make physical activity cooler. We took some of our high school students, some of our athletes, some of the well-known students in the community, paired them up with elementary students who might need to do a little bit more physical activity, and they became their buddies. They did things together. They walked together. They went to ninja gyms together, and that was a wonderful thing. We did community physical activities like 5Ks, like exercising at the library, like working CrossFit. And each child in our district had an individualized fitness goal. When they met that goal, they got prizes sponsored by the community. And something to help with physical fitness, you know how you eat with your eyes. We know you do physical activity with your eyes as well. So this is what our local park looked like before we began this effort. If you were a child, would you want to go there? Well, now we have a new playground at our local park. We have a playground edition just for toddlers. We also have fitness stations. We have a multi-purpose field where kids can play, volleyball courts. We have a paved walking track. We also have a walking track and disc golf at our elementary school. Again, the message for fitness is everywhere. The focus is on being healthy, moving, and eating better. So who are we now? Well, overall, our county obesity rate is down to 34%, according to the latest Behavior Risk Factor Surveillance Survey, which is quite a bit better than it was. In the county health rankings issued by Robert Wood Johnson and University of Wisconsin, Clinton County moved up 30 notches in health outcomes. We went from 94th to 64th. That's a big move. Our county health improvements were featured in various state and national media outlets, which is something that doesn't happen to our county very often. And we just have a renewed sense of positivity and a focus on being healthy. That's what's most important. Our teachers, our students, our parents, our community now have a sense of pride in being healthy. And I will leave you with one final quote that is one of my favorites that I use often, and it is that, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. If our community can do it, so can others. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you, Paula. That was excellent, and it's so wonderful to hear a great success story. And I would say that that Margaret Mead quote is a favorite of mine as well. So our final speaker is Nellie Ellis, who will address these important nutrition and physical activity issues with a youth perspective. Nellie is from Whitley County and a freshman at Center College in Danville. She has been volunteering with Kentucky Youth Advocates for several years and also works with Citizen University. She has a passion for making positive change through civic action and advocacy. Nellie, it's all yours.
Hey guys, I'm so happy to be talking with you all today. And one thing that I'm really excited for when I was reached out to present today is just to share my own story. So right now I'm recovering from some disordered eating habits, which I think stemmed a lot from some well-meaning, good-intentioned policies within my school that were just carried out sort of poorly. And so today I'm going to be talking a little bit more, less like policy-driven or action-oriented than the other speakers, but about how we can use peer intervention in ways that don't enforce negative thoughts or behaviors. So when and how is it appropriate for peers to intervene when promoting healthy lifestyles through nutrition and physical activity? Well, I'm going to share a quote by one of my favorite dietitians. She calls herself the sassy dietitian because she does look at food from a holistic perspective. But she says, here's where the lines get gray, crossed, and twisted. We all eat, or at least I hope we all eat, so we feel as though in some way, shape, or form we're an expert in food and what to eat. For the most part, you are your own expert in what to eat, but that's where the expertise stops. Many diets are one way to eat, they are not the way to eat. So what she's talking about here is although, and like I said, this is a peer intervention type perspective, although we all eat and we might find things that work great for us, they're not going to work great for everyone because everyone has different bodies, different backgrounds, and are on different paths in their lives. The same can be said for exercise. What works for you might not work for everyone. What is healthy for you may not be healthy for everyone. I run a lot. I really enjoy it, but if I were to go to my mama, she would probably not want to run at all. And so, but she might enjoy taking a walk outside right now and taking pictures of the pretty trees. It's just different for everyone according to like their age, what stage of life they're in, that sort of thing. So peer intervention should be from a place of compassion and respect. Like I said, I know that everyone probably has good intentions, but we really want to make sure that we're not enforcing negative thoughts or behaviors around food and exercise and body. So when we do this, I want us to think of a kindergartner talking to another kindergartner. This is going to sound silly, but bear with me. I've wrote a few scenarios. So which would sound more appropriate? When a kindergartner is talking to another. You're eating a muffin? That's so bad for you. It's too much sugar and empty calories. Here, eat this plain oatmeal instead. Or, you're eating a muffin? That looks yummy. I like to have yogurt with a muffin sometimes. you should try it. Of course, it makes sense that the second scenario would happen. A kindergartner is not going to enforce some negative images around a muffin. Instead, they're going to say, hey, I like having this with it. It's, yogurt fills me up more. So another example I wrote down is if they were to say, you sit down a lot. I know you hate playing basketball, but you have to play basketball or keep sitting down. So play basketball because it's the right thing to do, even though you hate it. Or would they say, hey, we haven't gotten to play in a long time. We should go outside and find a fun game that we both like. So again, this is really silly, but when you think about it, in the media, in some like policies and stuff, sometimes it can feel very forceful with when and how and what to do things. But in reality, we should all find stuff that works for each individual person. There's no any one right way to do things as long as we're all being healthy and active in whatever way works best for us. So going forward, some general things to remember when we do have this peer intervention is to keep the mindset of the kindergartner in our thoughts. So when we're talking about food, we should do it in a neutral way instead of using terms like good, bad, clean, nice, etc. I know we've all probably seen that thrown around in magazines, on social media, and it enforces some negative thoughts and obsessions around food. Talk about what bodies do or how they feel rather than what they look like. Encourage exercise for the sake of health and enjoyment, not for weight control. And one motto that I really love and that I've touched on previously is different bodies, different paths. Be mindful that everyone is unique and what works is helpful for you may not work or be the same for everyone else. So especially with, you never know when people are recovering from an eating disorder or little kids, what little things might stick with them, or how different families feel around certain foods. Just making sure that you, like I said, if you approach this with good intentions, that you don't enforce negative thoughts or behaviors, and that you're mindful that healthy looks different for everyone, and that your experience isn't the only right way to do things. So some examples of how this would look like is it can look like a variety of things. So for little kids, asking others to play, go on a walk, as we get older, being running buddies, etc., encouraging others to try new things. And so for these first two examples, I loved what Paula shared with her fitness buddies and walking clubs, and then the fun little trying different foods. We can do this ourselves as peers. If we cook a meal, we can invite a friend over to share it with us. Or if we're going outside on a walk, inviting them along, that sort of thing. Also, using social media to spread positivity. We all know that, especially as we get older, social media can be used in a negative way for comparison, bullying, that sort of thing. But you can also use it to spread good information, which is my other point, and just positive things around overall health and wellness. And then also step up when a conversation or interaction feels wrong. If there is an administrator or peer who is making fun of somebody, who says something that just seems, like I said, something negative that would enforce those thoughts and behaviors or obsessions around food and exercise, just step in and maybe change the topic or just talk about how it's not right. And also just making sure that you avoid talking about if you are dieting, your diet, or just making sure that you keep your language body neutral and that you keep the overall wellness of others in mind. And so that's all I have for you, and I'm going to pass it back to Mary Ann.
Thank you, Nellie, so much for your excellent insights. And I can tell you as a registered dietitian, I wholeheartedly agree with the whole conversation around positive and negative phrases and interventions. So thank you. Well, thank you so much to each of the speakers this afternoon for sharing your expertise. So let's get started with the Q&A. We have several questions, but I encourage those of you that are on the webinar today to please add more questions because, and I've added a few myself, but I'm going to start with one of the first ones when Allison introduced, is that, and I'll throw it out to basically maybe all of you, the speakers could just briefly, but the second one about how do we create a sense of urgency around the importance of improving children's nutrition and physical activity. Jamie, maybe I'll direct this to you initially and then to Paula because you identified some of this, but what are your thoughts?
Well, I'll speak to this from the perspective of a parent to start with, and it also tells you how a lot of our educational priorities are still broken. As a dad, watching my 3 children go through COVID and distance learning, it was real frustrating to navigate a global pandemic where every day our governor's giving these health literacy and physical literacy messages around the importance of movement in your mental health, movement in your social health, taking care of yourself. All of those health, he became the state's health teacher every single day at 5 o'clock. But yet when I would help my kids navigate their learning, that was not a message that was coming home from school. And that's just because those health and PE messages are so minimized in our system of high stakes accountability we've created. There are certainly places that have done a great job of elevating that. But when we look across the spectrum at the equity piece, we're just so entrenched in that mindset. And so I do believe that COVID is helping us to rethink things but we've got to really do more than just lip service in this next iteration of school accountability and school priorities moving forward.
Paula, anything to add?
I just think one of the things that worked for us is when we could personalize the statistics, and it became not just a big Kentucky statistic, but they were very local. And here's what's happening to our children, and here is the life expectancy for our county. And so it became personal. People started to really realize that if we want our children to grow up and have better lives than we've had, and most people do want that, they really, really do, then this is something that we can work on that, when you say it's a matter of health, it's a matter of quality of life. And that's what worked for us.
Thanks. Any additional comments, Amanda or Nellie?
Hi, Marianne. This is Amanda, and I simply want to add that I think, it's really important to have the buy-in from obviously the top leadership because everything, ripples down from that. I think a lot of times really over the years it seems like wellness, physical activity, and kind of to Jamie's point when he was talking about when he was doing his presentation, the limited number of minutes for PE. I think that's dwindled really over the years, really in general. And I think, wellness and physical activity really should not be considered a, quote, soft subject. I mean, it's something that is extremely important. And Paula talked a little bit about that when she was referencing, what are the county stats and how you personalize that. I think it's almost, it's just as important about teaching our kids finances and, how do they save money and how are they going to buy a house or pay for things in the future. I mean, wellness, physical activity is just as important, really, as any other subject that they have in school because obviously, we only have one body and we need to take care of that and we need to treat it extremely well and we need to be passionate about that and we need to, really help to get folks to, like, for example, if they have celebrations at schools or things like that, really, having healthier options available. Let's not always go, or not always, but let's not frequently go towards the items that really are probably more of the unhealthy. Let's use those opportunities as educational opportunities, kind of what they were talking about with the, planting the gardens and, kind of doing the teaching kitchens and things like that. Make people passionate about it, personalize it. And again, it's not a soft subject. It's beyond important. And the more people that recognize that, the quicker we'll get to our goals.
Thanks, Amanda. Nellie, I'm going to pivot that question just a little bit for you because we had a question come in from Allison Rosenstock, which I think is, and commented on your excellent presentation, and so important to bring in the intuitive eating, what works for the individual approach. So from your perspective, how do you think schools or institutions that offer approach can help present foods in a way that would allow for flexibility while also promoting nutrient-dense foods?
So really, I think, and when I was saying that it was implemented in a way that was poorly, I just can really recall we would be weighed once a year, and I remember a teacher remarking from the time I was in second grade to third grade about some weight gain in a very negative way. And also just you had your standard food pyramid, and really all that we were told is they really had a hard focus on this is how much sugar you can have. You can only have this much, don't go over. And so it really just enforced some food rules, food obsession, weight obsession, and exercise obsession, and rules within myself. And I know that I'm not the only one who's experienced this, whether it's on greater or smaller levels. And so to me, I think what would have been more beneficial is if there were more programs like the examples that Paula gave us. Obviously I hadn't seen her presentation, but I was just so awestruck by it because if I had been given the ability to garden and try my own veggies, or if I had been able to have a buddy to go and do activities with, that's a lot less, I think, harmful than the ways that it was implemented within my school system. And yeah, I just really think that making it fun, making it interesting and interactive is a lot better than just the kind of like just this is how it is and you have to stick to it type of language. I really enjoy the implementation that she shared.
Thank you. And so Paula, since Nellie mentioned your name, I'm going to direct this question to you. We had a question come in, and I'm going to add a second part to it. The first one is, what was the most important ways that you got the community to work together? And then I'm going to add to this and just say, from your perspective, how do we get schools involved if and change and go in this direction if they're not grants involved?
Okay, one of the things I would say, an important way we got the community to work together, and Nellie brought up positivity on social media. I think positivity does it. When you have something that it just makes people feel good and things are going on that are positive, others want to be part of that. And so that's how we got the community hooked initially. I think another thing that was very helpful there was to do projects that are visible. So I brought up the playground project. That was a really important piece for our coalition because it was so visible to the community. And we involved the community in raising the funds. We involved the community in putting the playground equipment together. So every time people pass, and it's on a main road in our small town, they look over, they see that, they feel pride in that. And so, again, it was a visible, tangible thing that they could look at, but then they would know, hey, look, those kids are over there getting healthy because they're having physical activity, and they brought their kids, and they talked about it. So that was important. And then I just think it is critical to get schools involved, and I think Amanda and Jamie nailed this when they talked about we are so focused sometimes on testing and standards, and listen, I'm the supervisor of instruction for our district. So it's important to get folks like that involved so they can then say, yes, test scores are important, but you know what? So is the quality of your life, and so is living a good life outside of school. So I think those things are key as well.
Thank you, Paula, and thanks to all the speakers. That is all the time we have for live questions today, but there are a few questions remaining, and please know we will be responding to you in the days ahead. And if there are still questions just from even the Q&A, feel free to continue to post them. This webinar will be posted at www.healthy-kentucky.org later this week. I joined the Foundation for a Healthy Kentucky and Kentucky Youth Advocates in inviting you to share the link with your network. So remember that the next webinar in the Bost Health Policy Forum series is Monday, December the 14th, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. The title is Understanding Youth and Building Good Mental Health. And our speakers will discuss statewide and community-based youth mental health programs, internet and social media safety, and suicide prevention. So thank you all again for participating today, and we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you and have a great day.